We're now going to move on to the next panel, which is going to be looking at the very important issue of sustainability. And to chair this panel is my colleague and friend, Pilita Clark. Pilita is an associate editor and business columnist on the Financial Times. Her column, which appears on Sunday, Monday, about the future of work, is something I'm sure that many of you read. But she's also, I would say, the FT's real expert on the relationship between business and the environment and the question of sustainability. So, Pilita, I'd like to hand over to you now to introduce your panel to talk about sustainability.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our next session on the role of sustainability in guiding corporate strategy. My name is Pilita Clark. I'm a business columnist at the Financial Times, a newspaper that now devotes more space to sustainability or ESG issues than I suspect it has ever done in its 133-year history. There's a very simple reason for that. In the words of a report from the Institute for International Finance this year, sustainability is the crisis of our generation, and it is therefore rising fast up corporate agendas around the world. It's actually quite hard to believe that the very first chief sustainability officer at a publicly traded US company wasn't really appointed until 2004. And even 10 years ago, there were only 29 chief sustainability officers at a Fortune 500 company. But by last year, interestingly, that number had more than tripled. In fact, Fortune 500 companies hired more first-time chief sustainability officers in 2020 than in the previous 3 years combined. And those numbers are very widely expected to grow as the strategic influence of sustainability officers and their teams grows within organizations. So to look at what this means for both ESG professionals themselves and for the human resources departments that support them, I'm very pleased to be joined today by an extremely experienced panel of speakers. We have Ayla Bajwa, who's the head of sustainability and impact at DP World. Peter Bragg is the sustainability and government affairs director for EMEA at Canon. Jocelyn Phelps is the program director for leadership and organization development at Société Générale Bank in France, or SocGen as it's better known to much of the world. And Jörg Eigendorf is the global head of communications and sustainability at Deutsche Bank. I want to start off by looking briefly, just very briefly, at why we're seeing such a rising interest in sustainability within corporations. And one big factor, of course, is the rising interest from investors who want businesses to demonstrate their understanding of environmental, social, and governance issues. Jörg, I wonder if, would you agree that rising investor pressure is changing the way that Deutsche Bank has had to deal with ESG issues? And also, are investors more concerned about the E, the S, or the G in ESG?
Thank you very much, Pilita. And I think a very, very good question. It's not only the investors, it's all stakeholder groups. And in fact, we felt at first from the next gen in our wealth management business, who told us, hey guys, if we inherited from our parents this portfolio, there's so much dirt in there, can you manage it away for us? And so you get, and this tells the whole story, you get pressure and opportunity almost from all stakeholder groups, from the clients, from your employees who want to be proud to work for us, for the bank, from politics and regulators, and from investors. And I think all of these groups feed each other regularly. So investors have understood by now how important it is to have this in the middle of the agenda. So we moved sustainability in 2019 with our new strategy, Compete to Win, into a management priority. It was one slide in a 40-slide investor presentation, slide 38. We had 4 management priorities, and one of them was sustainability. Since then, we have very opportunistically moved forward in every strategic pillar: sustainable finance, policies and commitments, our own operations and people, and thought leadership and stakeholder engagement. And now we are moving it into the core. So we are effectively working on our sustainability strategy 2.0, because we feel, on the one hand, the pressure, but on the other hand, a huge amount of opportunity, especially for a universal global bank like Deutsche, which is an asset originator, and we can originate the assets others want. So it has become core of the business. And with our...
what does that actually mean, Jörg? When you say it's moved to the center of the business, what does that mean? How has it changed your job?
It has changed my job personally, for example, that I'm now responsible for the so-called key deliverable sustainability to the regulators, to the management. We have a sustainability management board committee chaired by our CEO. I report into the CEO, and I'm his deputy in this management board committee, sustainability. We have a sustainability council which embraces the whole company. Then we have 22 work streams right now, very agile. We are building these work streams, closing them down again when we achieved it. But there are work streams like CO2 footprint, which is becoming really a huge operative task. And what has helped tremendously, having a target. We have this 200 billion target in sustainable financing and investment till we originally said in 2020, it's up to 2025. In 2021, we felt already we will achieve this by 2023. Now, at October 2021, we have already 125 billion in sustainable financing and investment.
Okay.
So it's moving forward. And it's becoming business. It's really becoming business.
Yeah, fantastic insight into how that's changed radically. I just want to quickly go around the screen. And Peter, at Canon, are you finding that investors are the biggest drivers of pressure on ESG, or is it more customers, for example? And again, similar question, what are stakeholders most interested in? Is it environmental, social, governance, or a mix of all three?
Hi, Pilita. Yeah, I think for us, certainly at an EMEA level, it's customer focused. No doubt, Canon as a global organization, that ESG agenda, it's critical from investors, but so we're listed in Japan, so the pressures feel slightly remote from me, in my role. Within the EMEA region, though, as Jörg said, obviously, we've got all our stakeholder groups, employees, and what have you, but customers are definitely driving change, and that's both on B2B and B2C. On the B2B side as well, I could kind of split our customers between public sector organizations and private organizations. Public sector absolutely driving this, and that's with or without legislation in place, and we're seeing that in certain EMEA regions as well. Nordics very big on the social side, other areas pushing us much harder. Spain, for instance, around recycling requirements. Look at private companies as well. Some of our very big customers, they're doing what we're all doing, pushing the agenda down their supply chain as well. So, in a way, the system is working in that it's driving change all the way down.
Yeah, that supply chain pressure is very interesting, I think, Peter, isn't it? Because, I presume that, you will get a call or an email one day saying a supplier in a part of the world you've never perhaps even thought about very much before is insisting that, I don't know, Canon printer cartridges have to be completely recyclable in a way that they currently aren't, or something. I mean, it's a huge,
I don't mind. Yeah, I can call them out. Yeah, I think we a year or two ago, Tesco's in the UK made put some requirements around packaging on us that we had to respond to, and we were able to do that so that we could continue selling in their stores.
What did they want?
I can't remember the exact requirement. I think it was around the type of packaging that we were using.
Right. So a big group like that, you really can't ignore what they want. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, but it shows the power of, as we can all do as big corporations ourselves, by working with our supply chain to make those changes.
That's a great example, I think, of how the role of the sustainability team has really changed, because if that demand weren't there, then the pressure on your team presumably wouldn't be there. Ayla, I just wondered quickly at DP World, are you? I know you've got a different ownership structure to Canon and Deutsche Bank, but how would you describe the sorts of pressures from stakeholders on the business?
Yeah, so we definitely take a multi-stakeholder approach to our sustainability strategy. So we look at our complete value chain all the way from investors, because we do raise capital. And so we are getting questions from those larger entities. So we do look at ESG ratings. We are rated from Sustainalytics to MCSI. We are focused on ESG reporting and public disclosure. So we do look at that stakeholder. But then also we are receiving many queries. And I would say that they've maybe doubled in the last year in terms of customers. So our customers and our partners are asking us questions. We're getting very long and elaborate questionnaires to complete related to ESG risk factors. And so not only does it require us to become more efficient and public in our reporting, but it also serves as a great gap analysis as well, right? So when you're going through these questionnaires, it makes you think, okay, well, maybe we need to focus more on this and that. And so I will say that these questionnaires are less generic now. They're not as short anymore, and they're definitely more extensive. And then you would be surprised, like even from a community perspective. So we have very large UN entities as partners. We are strong when it comes to our corporate citizenship, but they also do a fair amount of due diligence on how we operate as a business. So it's really looking at the complete value chain from customers, and then our employees. Our employees are asking us questions. In fact, our employees are constantly challenging us about, why are we not doing more in this area? Or why don't we know? When you are a very large entity, sometimes it's just about getting the word out there and ensuring that they know that not only are we doing the work, but we're constantly looking at continuous improvement.
Yeah. Well, getting the word out there internally is also a big challenge, I know, in many organisations, particularly when you've got tens of thousands of employees. And Jocelyn, I wonder, when it comes to making sure that everyone in the organisation understands that ESG is no longer, or CSR or sustainability is no longer something in the back office, it's something that everyone from the CEO down takes incredibly seriously, everyone's going to have to get across and understand. How are you going about doing that at SocGen?
Well, Pilita, I think we can really look at the entire employee journey, and that's a journey that starts when people aren't even yet employees of the group. We know that young people especially, but not only, are looking at us and saying, okay, you're a bank, but what do you finance and how do you work and what countries are you involved in and how are you moving in this area? And then, once people do join the organization, this is a very hot topic, of course, but they work in a physical place, right? Well, what is that physical place they work in? How do they get there? How do we support their use of different forms of transportation? And then the whole question of development. We're a bank with a strong reputation for training and developing our staff. And now the question is, how can we help people keep up with the pace of change? As everybody else here has said, there are increasing demands on understanding new products, being able to create new products, understanding shifting client requirements. And then I think, too, that there's also a much stronger feedback loop. How do we take into account things that employees are asking for? And some of those changes go all the way up to retirement. You can now look at your retirement savings managed by the group or made available by the group, and you can actually orient those towards more ESG colored options. So it's really changing the entire employee journey, I'd say.
Yeah, and how has it affected your role particularly, Jocelyn? Has it meant, for example, that you're devoting a lot more of your time to areas of work that you might not have been, say, 2 or 3 years ago? Or have you had to hire more people into your team or not?
Mm-hmm. What we're seeing is that, the whole area of learning and program management is that you want to bring your work to the business, right? So, and what we're finding is that a lot of the standard approaches, like working with projects or who you bring in to get involved in the program, we're being asked now, and actually to set up ESG and especially environmental approaches to that. And the question is really to say, how can I build this in? I think that there's a very strong, the regulatory culture is very strong. I'm sure that Jörg can speak to this as well. And the question is, within that strong culture with very clear expectations, how do we build this into everything that we do? So it's maybe not so much about adding people, but it's about having better networks and being more connected to other parts of the organization so that we really can make this a continuous red thread that goes through all the work that we do.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Well, Jörg, Deutsche Bank and SocGen, in fact, are both members of the Net Zero Banking Alliance, which is a new group, which is basically requiring banks that sign up to it to commit to carbon neutrality at some point. And it's, of course, raising expectations about the sort of financing that Jocelyn's mentioned. What should banks finance and for how long? For example, will there be a roadmap that will set out how a bank plans to get out of supporting fossil fuel companies? I just wondered, can you tell us how closely were you involved in that move, in joining that alliance, and what's it likely to mean for your role in the short term?
First of all, I'm always involved when we sign up for something, and the one thing my team and I have to do then is to evaluate what does it do to our businesses, because you can sign up for everything very quickly, and but then you may regret later on. And sometimes it's not that we don't want to sign up to something, but it's really, can we measure it? So in here with the Net Zero Banking Alliance, this is a very big step. We could sign it easily because we had signed something similar already in the fall of 2020 in Germany. And that was a cumbersome process where we said, can we deliver this? And what does it mean for our business? Effectively, the transparency that will be created, and that everybody needs to understand, by end of 2022, we will all, SocGen as us, we will, all of them who have signed up to the Net Zero Banking Alliance will have to publish the carbon footprint of their loan portfolio. That effectively means there will be a huge amount of transparency afterwards. And there will be scrutiny, and regulators will look at it, lawmakers will look at it. And we are preparing for it now. We know by now already what the carbon footprint of our loan portfolio is. We are thinking about what does it mean for the most carbon intense sectors. There's a huge concentration on very few clients. How will we manage that afterwards? And by the way, it's not that trivial that you can say then afterwards, oh, banks will manage it immediately down. If you have a client that subscribes to Science-Based Target Initiative, for example, who says, I will manage it down until 2040 credibly and will be measured, then we can engage more with that client, even if this client is carbon intense. So there will be huge scrutiny also from the public side, and that will be a big communication task to go out, tell it to investors. They will look, how do you manage? And this is one of the main questions we get right now. How are you managing client risk? How do you manage your carbon footprint? How do you interact with a client? We strongly believe in transition dialogue. So we are focusing on what do we invest in the dialogue with our clients in this. So it's a huge process. And just by what I told you now is it feeds into almost every part of the company, and it's risk management starting with it. But then you have to think about what does it mean in the client interaction? What do our client-facing people tell the clients? How do we train them to get ready for this? So it's a huge task, really, through just this one signature to the Net Zero Banking Alliance has a chain of reactions. And
as you say, it's completely unprecedented, really, that signing up to one of these alliances, I think it's unprecedented for a lot of organizations, that the act of signing up really means there's just going to be this unprecedented level of transparency and explanation and work that an organization has to do, right?
Yes, and it will change the landscape. And at the end of 2022, we won't face this one-on-one discussion anymore on clients. We will face, this is the carbon footprint of your loan portfolio. And let's face it, this is scope 3 emissions, not scope 1 and scope 2.
Right,
Canon
and just
definitely,
to explain to everyone if anyone's watching and isn't entirely across scope 1, 2, and 3, scope 1 is your own as the bank, which are very low.
Exactly. Scope 2 is what we use as energy from outside. Scope 3 then is really what are we facilitating in emissions, and this is the main factor in a bank. I mean, we are carbon neutral since 2012, but look, this is not, Canon has a much bigger task to become carbon neutral than we do.
Of
but
course. Well,
scope three
it's so interesting. I mean, but actually, I mean, I'm interested to know, you know, at Canon, and I suspect maybe DP World, I'm not sure that the net zero target is going to present quite the same sorts of demands. Peter, at Canon, are you facing any sort of program of radical transparency in the way that Jörg and actually Jocelyn as well at SocGen is going to be facing, or is it a slightly different set of demands?
I think it's probably a slightly different set, Pilita. I mean, we, as Canon globally, has set a 2050 net zero target, and you know, in Japan, looking at the, you know, because obviously, as Jörg hinted, they've got the entire supply chain. We're looking within EMEA at how we respond to that and what we can do inside that. But yeah, it won't. Obviously, it's a huge amount of work for us, but it won't substantially change the landscape, I don't think, for us as a business. It may, some certain customers are pushing for net zero targets. We know within the government that PPN is, you know, is asking for major government suppliers to sign up to have a net zero target and a carbon reduction plan. I think what's challenging as well, though, in terms of a sustainability strategy is, you know, I mean, like many people on the call, I've worked in sustainability for nearly 25 years now. There's always a bandwagon, and net zero is the biggest bandwagon in town at the moment. But actually, for us, certainly within EMEA, that's not our biggest impact, and it's not the biggest concern for our customers either. You know, we see circular economy as being a far bigger issue for us. So much of my focus and my team's focus is around pushing the agenda and pushing the barriers on what we're able to do around the kind of consumable products that we have, and making sure that we meet our customers' needs and help them around that. But yeah,
what's an example, Peter, of how pressure to demonstrate your commitment to circular economy principles is playing out in the business?
Yeah, I can use a printer example. Anyone that uses a printer knows that you have cartridges at a kind of home printer level, but obviously up to the types of multifunction devices that you see in the office, if they're Canon ones, or you know, some of our competitors as well. You know, they all use toner cartridges. We have toner bottles. Obviously, it's very challenging across an entire market to develop collection schemes for those, and then refill them and reuse them, find responsible ways to deal with them. So, you know, that's certainly an example of where we're working hard to do as much as we can to facilitate that. And obviously, we're looking across our entire region as well. You know, I look at kind of Western Europe, where there's perhaps more mature postal systems or logistics systems, but we also, a big part of our business is in Africa as well. And so, you know, that we have other challenges that go on there. But yeah, it's, you know, our aim is to, you know, really maximize the amount of material that is recycled. But then, we also have printers themselves, and we are now selling remanufactured printers in the European market that are effectively refurbished to be like a new machine and completely reset. And they reuse up to 80% of the material from the printers that were bought in to be reused. So there's a great message there. Obviously, there's a carbon saving as well, but, you know, approximately, that's 80% less material that is being, or 80% less virgin new material in supplying that printer.
Okay, that's interesting, and that's a relatively new initiative, isn't it?
We've been doing that over, I can't remember the exact launch date, actually. It was before I joined Canon, but yeah, we're seeing, you know, real increased demand for that as a product.
Interesting.
Which is fantastic. And again, that's from customers that want to, you know, have very much an environmental sustainability ethos, and are very attracted by the idea of a product that also is able to offer that as well.
Yeah, interesting. Now, Ayla, I saw you nodding your head as Peter was mentioning that the circular economy was a big driver and a big pressure in the industry, and I'm sure it is in the DP world as well. Now, we've got some questions that are relevant here. And by the way, thank you, everyone who sent a question in. Please do keep doing so. We're going to be taking them as we go along. and also a bit towards the end. So please do keep them coming in. But there's a question here, actually, from someone who's asking how the shipping industry is adapting to ESG. And I wonder, I mean, I know there's been big changes actually in the shipping industry, and particularly the way that they're looking at fuel use and design of ships, a huge range of things. But I wonder how that's affecting DP World.
Yeah, so it goes back to sort of what we were saying earlier, which is that multi-stakeholder approach, right? We're part of a larger value chain, and we respect the demands of our stakeholders, but also hold us accountable as being a company in Dubai. So the UAE has set its own internal agenda to achieve carbon neutrality. And so very much taking the guidance of our leadership, we have also set a target for carbon neutrality by 2050 with an interim target for 2030 to reach 28% reduction. And so these public commitments become very important. So consensus with your stakeholders become a very important part of developing your strategy. And so with that, we have developed two sets of strategies. So we have developed the Our World, Our Future strategy that identifies climate change as a key core topic that our stakeholders want us to address. And then within that climate change issue area, we have developed a decarbonization strategy that has highlighted these targets. And so ensuring that we get to those targets becomes critical. And so this is all public disclosure. This is all information that has been shared and holds us accountable internally. And to support that, we have multiple working groups in place, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's, so it's the reporting, it's the multi-stakeholder, it's the global commitments. So we are signatories of the UN Global Compact. And so under the 10 universally accepted principles, environmental stewardship is a key category. And so we very much follow that as a framework in identifying our priorities. In relation to the shipping industry, I think what it's important to know under the Our World, Our Future strategies, oceans is a key pillar for us because we respect and we understand that we thrive because of the space in the oceans, and it is our responsibility to ensure that our ports and terminals are as climate responsible as possible. And so does that, and we take it into consideration when building a new port and terminal, and also existing structures. And
so does that mean that you're under pressure to use things like green steel, green cement, the sort of fuel that you use?
Well, it is a part of our so only is a strong word. We actively work towards ensuring the most responsible materials are used. And that is very much set into our decarbonization strategy. So it's a multi-pronged strategy that looks at how we build and how we use energy and how we give back to marine biodiversity. So it's a multi-pronged approach, which is sort of what we need in order to achieve those targets.
Yeah. Okay, I want to move on to just the kind of a more direct, or a sort of I want to look at the physical organization of sustainability teams in organizations, and particularly it's kind of a long-running debate about who the chief sustainability officer should report to and what team they should live in. And Jocelyn, you've just appointed a new Chief Sustainability Officer at SocGen. Can you tell us who she reports to and what her team looks like?
Yes, so Hasina P reports directly to the Secretary General. We're a group of 150,000 people, so that's a fairly large organization. And the Secretary General really has that transversal perspective on all of the group. He covers not only the risk issues, but also the commercial issues and, of course, the internal issues. So that's really a very strong reporting line, and we're glad to have her there. We tend not to create big headquarters teams. We're much more interested in creating communities and networks of people. So behind Hasina and her team, there are networks of people who are involved in product and service development, who are involved in training, who are involved in, how can we change the way that the support functions work. So it's really, and I think that's interesting because, community is almost a buzzword now, but that's really what you want with an issue like this, especially for the environmental part, because it just has to percolate throughout the organization and percolate throughout the daily lives of the employees.
Interesting. And did her predecessor also report to the head of the organization?
Yes.
So that's always been
the positioning of the role. Yes. And what's very interesting, I find, is that both women came from a strong background in the business. So they know what it means to have to build a portfolio. They know what it means to have to maintain trusting relationships with clients. And then, of course, they also have the strong internal focus because they've been involved in running the bank itself. And I think that combination is also very, very important.
Yeah. And Jörg, even though you're head of global communications, the sustainability role doesn't actually live in the communications unit. Is that correct?
No, when I joined Deutsche Bank in 2016, it was part of social responsibility, and I had the responsibility for communications, brands, social responsibility. And then I carved it out of social responsibility, and eventually we carved it out of communications and social responsibility overall. We just separated because it's a real business function. I have to say that the backing of reporting into the CEO and look, the communications is a strategic function. This is also sustainability is a very strategic and cross-divisional function. With the backing of the CEO, much more is possible. I absolutely agree with what Jocelyn just said. You need to build networks. You should not build a 100, 200, 300 people group sustainability team. It is growing. My sustainability team is growing quickly, doubling in size right now every year. But you need to mobilize.
How big is it now? How many?
It's right now. It came from 10 to 20, and I'm sure by the end of next year it will be rather 40 or 50, and it will be growing day by day. It's just growing month by month because the need. For example, right now I'm building up a strategy function in sustainability, a strategy in PMO function. You really need these project management skills, because what Jocelyn just said is you need to tap into the whole company. You want to have a company that is that where everybody gets engaged. You need to build the networks, then have to work very agile with the teams to put it in place. And one of my jobs is really identifying a problem, asking myself who are the ones in the company who could support this process and could run this process, setting it up and facilitating their work and bringing it all then together again in the central strategy process. So that is really what you need to do in order to mobilize, and don't have too big central team where eventually everybody says, oh no, this is sustainability, leave it with these guys. Eventually, our goal must be, in a couple of years, the whole bank is sustainable and lives sustainability. And that must be the goal. And that means right now we have to move it into the core of every business decision. So for giving you an example, when I said NZBA at the beginning and carbon footprint, until 2 years ago, nobody cared in a credit decision, a loan decision. What's the carbon footprint of that? If you see now the data, you really see, oh, nobody cared. Right now, it's about creating this awareness with thousands of client-facing people with risk management that they need to care about it, and that this goes into the decision. Just a final thought, what Peter said before, we can only be carbon neutral. And I absolutely agree that carbon neutrality should not be all, because it's not. We can be carbon neutral and climate change will happen nonetheless. But we won't be carbon neutral if our clients won't be. And our goal must be transform and be with our clients on that transformation instead of kicking them out. And this is a big task, because these clients we potentially would kick out, they won't disappear. They will still be there. So it's our task to help and support them instead of just having this very radical approach. Sometimes NGO ask us to go.
Yes, that's a very live issue, and I guess it's going to become more live once those NGOs can actually see what your loan portfolio looks like. Really interesting. Thanks for that, Peter. Can you just explain what the structure is at Canon, and also You know, Jörg has mentioned an interesting point there. They've got this question of whether you actually need a dedicated group of sustainability professionals within an organization, or whether it's important to have sustainability principles embedded so thoroughly in an organization that you almost do yourself out of a job. So I'm interested in your view on that. But first of all, what's the structure at Canon?
So within Canon, Pilita, I sit as part of the legal function. I'm only one step removed from the chief exec, and a very supportive chief exec, and I've got very easy access to him as well. So I don't see that as a necessary barrier. And throughout the years, I think I've reported into strategy, safety, technical, engineer, variety of places, and I think it is just that access to that top decision making that's important. In terms of the team, I think, again, it's, as other people have mentioned, I think we've moved from a kind of recognition, okay, we've got to do sustainability, so we create a team. They can do everything because we don't really want anything to do with it. And there's definitely a shift going on. I think perhaps a few years ago we thought we might do ourselves out of a job, and as Jörg said, everyone's a chief sustainability officer, which kind of we still want, but I think there's a recognition. I certainly believe that the agenda is moving so fast. We've got, net zero was barely a thing 2 or 3 years ago, and now look at how big that is, and how we're all grappling with that. It's so vital now that I think there's still a need for a sustainability function, but I think that's moving to much more of a kind of strategic and decision-making function, whereas the actual delivery will sit with it at a kind of business unit level.
If I may, I couldn't underpin it more what he just said, because the space is moving so fast. We are not losing tasks. We're getting more and more strategic tasks on our back, and you have more and more specialized people in the functions. That will continue for a couple of years. The dream that everybody lives sustainability, that's our vision, but that will take. I mean, we are also 100,000 people organization. It's a tough job.
Yeah. And I mean, Jocelyn, I imagine
I would echo the same.
Sorry, Ayla.
I would echo the same.
Yeah, you're seeing similar sorts of changes there. Whoops, maybe it's me that's slightly frozen, or not. Jocelyn, I imagine it's probably a pretty similar story at SocGen.
Well, I was going to echo what Jörg just said. I think the issue is that the further we go into this, the more there's a need for broad awareness, and then the broad awareness allows people to say, so what specific skills do I need? We're now talking about things like, how do you take the temperature of a portfolio? A few years ago, that wasn't, nobody would have understood what that meant. But that might be a concern in one place, and again, in another place, the concern is going to be different. So it's going to be, what do I build? For example, do I build new branch offices, or do I do something different? Do I take advantage of the fact that I don't need that people can work remotely? But I think that and it also means that this is again an argument in favor of the networks. You really have to push the ability to act down to a very as local a level as you can, and then get as close to where the competencies already exist.
Yeah. Sorry, Ayla. I think I don't know if it's probably my internet connection, not yours. But I missed the last few words that you mentioned.
Yeah, no, sorry. It very well may be my internet as well. Just sort of echoing, what the fellow panelists were saying, that strategically our team is growing rapidly, and our strategic responsibilities are expanding. Yet we are looking at subject matter expertise in business units to drive the operations that need to occur to achieve the indicators under a sustainability strategy.
Yeah. Very interesting. Just an interesting question here. Picking up on what you said, Jörg, about how important it is to include the wider business ecosystem around Deutsche Bank in order to achieve sustainability goals. And the questioner is asking, how do you actually go about doing that?
you need to look, first of all, you need the risk management to calculate, for example, and again, I think NZBA, carbon footprint, net zero is a great example. How does it work? You then have a calculation by risk management, what's the carbon footprint? With that, you need to go to business and you have to say, okay, we will need to manage this down. What does it mean for our business strategy? Because look, right now we are working on a plan for 23 to 25 because our current strategy plan goes from 19 to 22. So you need to have this in your numbers, RWAs, what does it mean for revenues, what the risk-weighted assets, revenues, how do you allocate your resources, what do we do with the carbon-intense clients? Because there will be three types of clients that go for science-based targets initiative and follow a clear pathway. There will be clients who try to, but will need our help. And there will be clients who say, hey, I don't care. And we need to make assumptions on all of that. What does it mean for, how do we interact with these clients? How can we support them? What does it mean, again, revenues? Because a plan is a plan. And I can tell you, once you have done a plan, it's very difficult to open it up again. Because what does it mean for the return on these assets? Because a lot of banks are competing right now for the same assets. And so there's so many questions you have to answer. So you go walk to risk management, then you go to business, you tell them what the truth is, you go through the data with them, then you have interactions on sectors, you have interactions on clients, you will analyze client by client. What does it mean again? How can we approach the client? So it gets very granular eventually. And that shows you already that you need the business on your side. You can't do this without the client relationship managers. For example, when we think about our transition dialogue with our clients, I take all the experience in from our client relationship managers who tell me how the clients have reacted so far. We have created a council, an outside council with clients to talk to them about what is a transition dialogue? How should we do it? How should the product look like? Then comes the next question, also interesting for those who are in HR. Yeah, we have a great transition dialogue. How will we then make it scalable? How do we roll it out? How many people do we have who can really go to the client and know what they're talking about? So I just gave you examples for very granular steps we have to think about. How do we train them? Do we need outside expertise for training them? And so on and so on. And so you really, and this is a fascinating thing. Once you've built a network, I can only advise anybody who wants to bring sustainability to the company, don't do it only centrally, build a network. I have right now at least 200 people to tap into in the company on senior management positions. I can give a quick call and say, I need this, this, and this now. Can you support me? And you need this support. And that's a fascinating thing, by the way. In sustainability, you get this tailwind from the people in your company. Our CEO was Christian Sewing, 30 years with Deutsche Bank. He said he's never seen so much positive energy behind a transformational idea, because and this change is transformational and touches every job.
Yeah. Well, that is really very interesting. Thank you so much for explaining to us in quite granular detail what's happening inside Deutsche Bank. And indeed, all four of you, thank you very much for giving us such an interesting insight into what is, as you've all said, a really tremendous amount of change going on, and something that's going to be affecting this area for many, many years to come, certainly not going away anytime soon. Unfortunately, we are out of time. So thank you so much. Thanks, everybody, for your excellent questions. And it's time to hand over to the next session. Goodbye from me.
Well, thank you, Pilita, and your panel. I think what I really took away from that is that the pressure for net zero, for sustainability, is coming from all sides, not just from investors, but from suppliers, from customers, and most importantly, from employees.